Liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov yet again handed out brutal fact checks to her four MAGA co-hosts as they complained ad nauseum about Vice President Kamala Harris, clearly panicked about the fact that at the moment, the vice president is dominating their cult leader, Donald Trump, in the election. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, as you know, we are the unofficial, unapologetic Jessica Tarlov fan club. She has the hardest job in media, and it brings a smile to my face when I see her on the Fox Propaganda Network. So we have a few clips to go over. Two of the biggest complaints that they have, the four of the five, not the whole five, because thank God Jessica Tarlov's there to provide a much-needed sanity check, a reality check. They complain, per usual, that the vice president, she's just not taking enough interviews. Why won't she sit down and talk to the press like Donald Trump? And they're desperate to make this a talking point. And I think she answers brilliantly and reminds them about who's winning the election and who's really the smart one here.
And some of her supporters are arguing, Jessica, that, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to talk to anyone. You don't have to answer questions of anyone. What are they? Trump goes out, he talks to CBS, talks to ABC, talks to NBC, goes on all these different things. He doesn't care when people throw questions at him, and he's willing to face them. I don't understand, as the judge says, she's the vice president of the United States. I mean, she's a smart woman. Go answer the questions. What's so hard?
Well, Trump doesn't actually dialogue with anyone in a way that exposes any details of his plans. He says, I'm going to deport them all. And no one follows up and said, well, how are you actually going to round up those millions of people?
That's not true.
Yes,
he's done CNN. He's done all kinds of, he's done pretty much every outlet. In an outlet he hasn't gone to and answered questions.
He calls these press conferences and he rants for upwards of an hour.
And then he takes questions.
But he doesn't answer them in any sort of...
Well, that's up to the American people to decide.
Exactly.
Or the press.
Or the press, but he's doing it.
The point about what Kamala is doing is that we have 81 days left. She will absolutely be sitting down, but she doesn't need to do it right now. Her supporters are not upset about it. Even people who are in the middle are not upset about it. She's giving speeches. She's telling people what she stands for. And that video with Governor Walz was charming. They were getting to know it. Well, it might not be to you, but to millions of people it would. Because we wouldn't have this kind of election right now where Kamala Harris is trending this way and Donald Trump is trending this way if what they're doing wasn't working. Wherever you get your polls, 538, Real Clear, The Economist, The Cook Political Report, any of it, Kamala Harris is trending in the right direction.
Well, that's
true. Because of her approach to this. And
so if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I get that.
That works.
I love it. God, so funny. Like, they interrupt, they heckle, they try to defend desperately Trump. Sure, Trump is really good on policy. He answers questions. Again, Lawrence O'Donnell, veteran journalist, veteran political journalist, MSNBC commentator, he put it brilliantly after Trump's, well, it's not his most recent disastrous press conference, but one of the more recent ones, which made all the news. Lawrence O'Donnell, when he was excoriating the press, was like, listen, if you ask a question, hearing words at the other end of your question mark from the person to whom you ask the question isn't necessarily an answer. So, for example, if you ask me a question and I respond with blah, 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 that's not an answer. Those are just utterances. Those are just, mouth noises, right? You actually have to address the question and try to do it substantively, which Donald Trump never does. That's what Mr. President, what is your plan to reduce inflation? And if I respond with, I'm Trump in this case, we're going to have a big, beautiful economy. Next question. That's not an answer. That is a response. It is not an answer. So it's so funny to watch these MAGA Fox News hosts twist themselves into knots to try to pretend that Donald Trump answers questions, doesn't go on non sequiturs, doesn't go on rants, and actually answers the questions substantively about foreign or domestic policy. Categorically ridiculous. And so Jessica is right to shut them down, saying, listen, you can critique her policy all you want because it's not really that you want. Here's the thing. She'll never say this either because she understands where her bread is buttered. She's got to keep her job. Or perhaps she genuinely believes this about her co-host, but we know this. Jeanine Pirro, Martha McCallum, Greg Gutfeld, and Jesse Waters, or the other guy subbing for Jesse Waters, they don't want to hear substantive questions from Vice President Harris or substantive answers to questions from Vice President Harris. They just want her to put herself in a position to potentially make a mistake that they can pounce on, or to put herself in a position that they can create a mistake for her, right? They want her to make herself an easier target for them and their bad faith commentary. That's it. So it's so funny, to hear like this concern trolling from these Fox News hosts. And finally, Jessica, I think, just drops all pretense. And she's like, listen, what she's doing is working. Real Clear Politics, 538, the Cook Political Report, every aggregate, every electoral forecaster, Frank Luntz, top Republican pollster, they're all saying the same thing. Vice President Harris is currently winning this election. So you all should probably be more focused on the stupid, terrible things that Donald Trump is doing, because he was in the lead. Now he's not. So instead of like endlessly whining and spinning tires about what the vice president is doing and asking her, hey, please stop, please deviate from this formula, Madam Vice President, which is causing you to win the election because you winning the election hurts my fifis. Perhaps instead, if you're an actual journalist, or indeed if you're just an actual Trump supporter, you should instead be turning to the Trump administration, losing this election, basically snatching defeat from the jaws of victory and going, guys, what the hell are you doing? What the hell are you doing? But it's Fox, so they're really reluctant to do that. Another clip I want to play concerns economic policy from Vice President Harris, which again, Fox and others have been clamoring for. The vice president has mentioned this in previous rallies, that one of the main priorities of her administration, if she wins the election, is to pursue corporations that price gouge. Okay, so in response to this is what the five, or what Janine Pirro of the five, had to say, and then this is also Jessica's response.
But she was, and Kamala talks about her being the attorney general, and I prosecuted these cases. Why? And the reason she's alleging it, she wants a federal ban, is because it's price gouging. It's all prosecuted by the states. Why didn't she call the individual attorneys general together and say, she's been there 3.5 years. Let's get together and deal with this price gouging. All of you, for each of your states, the White House will help you price gouge and find out who should be prosecuted. But no, she waits until now.
Well, I actually think that's a great idea. And I hope that Kamala is watching. We have read that she likes the show, and I hope that she takes that advice. I think part of the reason that this is coming right now is actually twofold. So one, this is the Kamala Harris top of the ticket. This is something that's a priority for her. She had a markedly different tone in discussing these issues than President Biden did. I never heard President Biden acknowledge that bread is up 50%, for instance. She's obviously fashioning herself differently in that way. The second part of this is, it was just in March that the FTC report, it was called Feeding America in Time of Crisis, came out. And they actually identified the fact that companies like Walmart, like Kroger, like Tyson were reaping profits so far above the supply chain problems that they had to call it out. And that's what led to this policy coming into being. So that's what she's going from. And I would also say that you could look at this as antitrust enforcement rather than price controls. And she hasn't been specific about that difference. And if it is antitrust enforcement, that's something that's very in line with who Kamala Harris is and who she has been throughout her career. Net, I think that this was an incredibly good day for Kamala. She was able to introduce herself to the American public in a way that she hadn't before. And you take the contrast of yesterday. So you had President Trump, someone who grew up a millionaire, became a billionaire, standing in front of his golf club, ranting and raving about everything, lying about everything from, GDP rates to poverty rates to energy production, et cetera. And then you have Kamala Harris, someone who's talking about her middle class upbringing, the fact that her family rented throughout their lives, so she knows what it means for people out there who can't get on the property ladder, someone who worked at McDonald's through college. You couldn't have the starker juxtaposition between these two candidates. And then on top of it, she's saying to people, I feel your pain. I know how much things cost. You know what I want to do? I want to build 3 million new housing units. You know what I want to do? I want to cap prescription drug prices for everyone, not just Medicare recipients. I mean, yesterday, we didn't get to talk about it because of the Trump press conference, but because Medicare is negotiating drug prices, seniors will get to keep $6 billion of their dollars. That's $1.5 billion in out-of-pocket costs that will be saved because of the policies from the Biden-Harris administration. And that's what today is about regular people getting to keep more of their money.
Greg,
she is just so freaking good at this. She really is. I mean, again, what's so fascinating about even that last part at the end, because Vice President Harris, I mean, number one, she's the vice president. She's his second in command, President Biden's second in command, but she cast the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which included the provision which allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices for the first time. Donald Trump promised to do it. He did. He campaigned on doing it in 2016 and then let it go. Right. So this is yet another apples to apples comparison that Trump promised to do something and failed for 4 years. President Biden got it done. And Vice President Harris was part of the team that made it happen. So she can lay claim to that. She can say, hey, listen, he runs his mouth. He talks a good game, but my game is much better than his when the rubber meets the road. And it's because of the Biden-Harris administration and the Democrats alone, because Republicans voted against it. Now, seniors enrolled in Medicare will be able to save lucrative amounts of money on prescription care or prescription drugs. Okay. And what will happen is, I mentioned this before, God forbid Trump wins the election, he's going to try to take credit for that. Because as it begins to roll out and more tranches of Medicare drug negotiations occur, because it's like a schedule of 10 drugs at a time, he'll take credit for it and the press will give him a pass. And Republicans, like those on the 5, will bend over backwards to appease his lie, even though it's not true. Great performance by Jessica Tarlov. She lays out the facts so damn well. And again, as of this moment, the vice president is winning this election. That may change tomorrow. So not only are we obligated to keep the energy and the momentum up, we should also take the time to bask in their despair. Love it. Let me know what you think in the comments.